Okay, so if you've ever felt like your life is just this one long, exhausting race, well, you're in exactly the right place. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking Stephen Crook's insights from Chapter 2, The Highway of the Mind. We're going to figure out how to exit this mental interstate of constant pressure and ultimately discover your true calling. Let's jump right in and look at what happens when the demands of modern life push us to the absolute brink.
Let's dive into this. When your agenda is just overflowing and life feels like a literal sprint, what's actually controlling your energy? Picture this, okay? It's 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Your inbox just hit triple digits, you've got 3 back-to-back meetings, and your phone literally will not stop buzzing. We usually think we're in the driver's seat during these moments, right? But when the pressure spikes like that, our focus usually defaults to a very specific, deeply ingrained reaction. So today, we're breaking down exactly what that reaction is, and more importantly, how you can take your mind back.
All right, Section 1, the highway of the mind.
We're starting by looking at this modern experience we all share, living day to day on this relentless mental interstate. You absolutely know this feeling. You're racing against deadlines, the dashboard mileage is just ticking away, and it feels like this invisible force is constantly pushing you forward, faster and faster. The source material uses the example of a highly successful professional who is perpetually chasing targets. On the outside, they're totally crushing it. But inside, they're gripping the steering wheel, mentally bracing for the next fire they have to put out. Even at 9 p.m., when they're supposed to be kicking back with their family, they're physically in the room but mentally 100 miles away. It's that clammy, heavy hand of stress on the back of the neck. That is the reality of the mental highway. It's a relentless stream of stimuli that just overwhelms our senses and leaves us feeling, frankly, empty, despite all that outward productivity.
Which brings us to Section 2, Trap of the Old Voice. Let's see how this highway turns into a real psychological trap. Now, here's what's actually super fascinating about this. That internal voice telling you to rush, it isn't reality. It is a conditioned reflex, a survivor mechanism the author calls the old voice, and it constantly whispers, I'm running out of time, I have to do more, I gotta work harder. Think about it for a second. Our primal brains, they just haven't evolved as fast as our tech. So when your boss shoots over an urgent email with a vague subject line, your brain actually misinterprets that ping as a literal predator rustling in the bushes. It creates a completely false perception of a physical threat, trying to convince you that if you just work a little harder or clear just one more email, you'll finally be safe. But, spoiler alert, that piece never actually arrives.
Instead, this intense stress triggers what's known as robber behavior. This is a vicious cycle where you unknowingly steal time from the things that actually matter for a quick dopamine kick. Like mindlessly scrolling through your phone when the pressure just gets to be too much. And look, at first glance, it feels like relief, right? You're distracted, you feel a little numb, but the deep irony here is that attempting to relax by staring at a screen actually spikes our stress levels even higher. It increases impulsivity and leaves us with this deeper, lingering stress. Before you know it, you've become a reactive passenger on your own mental highway, just strapped in and speeding straight toward burnout.
And it's perfectly captured by this idea that the chain of habit is too light to be felt until it is too heavy to be broken. These subtle, completely socially accepted habits act like a facelifted cell. Just think about that imagery. These habits look totally normal to the outside world because everyone is busy, everyone is exhausted, everyone is scrolling at the dinner table, but they are silently corroding our authentic joy. They give us the absolute illusion of being constantly connected, all while leaving us feeling totally alone. They offer only the most superficial relaxation while keeping us locked securely behind gilded bars of our own making.
So, how do we break out of this cell? Let's move to Section 3, Forging New Neural Pathways. Because look, we don't just want a temporary fix here, we want structural, permanent change.
And the brain science behind this trap is amazing. By choosing differently, we can actually shift control away from the fear-driven amygdala and move it over to the rational, calm prefrontal cortex. See, the old voice, that constant state of panic, lives right in the amygdala. It's constantly screaming that everything from a traffic jam to a tiny typo is a life-or-death threat. But the new voice, the one that powers conscious decision-making, impulse control, and sustainable long-term planning, that relies on the prefrontal cortex. That's the highly evolved part of your brain right behind your forehead. This brings us to neuroplasticity. This means every single time you feel that intense urge to grab your phone, but you consciously choose not to, you literally forge new neural pathways. Our brains are incredibly plastic. They're physically moldable throughout our entire lives. By actively starving those old, unwanted impulses of your attention, those neural pathways literally fall silent. They just wither away from lack of use. At the same time, the pathways leading to resilience and self-control become highly efficient superhighways, so you aren't just changing your mind figuratively, you are fundamentally changing the physical structure of your brain.
Okay, so let's transition to the practical application of this science. In Section 4, the power of non-doing. How do we actually put this into practice every single day?
Well, as we can see here, not every void asks for filling. Sometimes space is needed for what must grow. We are so deeply conditioned by society to think we have to fix everything instantly, right? The old voice screams, tackle it, fix it, right now. But nature shows us that resting isn't inactivity. It's actually creating the necessary space for insight and growth. It's like a tiny seed planted in the ground. You don't constantly pull on it to make it grow faster, do you? No, you leave it be. It needs the quiet dark to sprout. Sometimes doing absolutely nothing with a distraction is the most effective, powerful action you can possibly take. When was the last time you truly did nothing?
So here is your practical blueprint for change. Step 1, recognize the trigger causing the stress or that feeling of emptiness. Catch yourself and literally say, okay, this is my stress trigger. Step 2, breathe and make a conscious choice to pause. This fraction of a second is your absolute moment of power. Step 3, shift your gaze and energy to a positive alternative. In the real world, this just looks like looking out the window at a tree, petting your dog, or just drinking a glass of water and noticing its temperature. And finally, step 4, schedule specific non-doing moments into your day. Even just 5 minutes of scheduled silence actively trains your brain to take the exit ramp.
And the benefits of these non-doing moments are massive. It trains your mind to break that automatic stimulus response behavior, shifting you from a reactive passenger to the proactive captain of your own life. The physical benefits, they are immediate. Medical studies show that when we take intentional, mindful pauses, our levels of the chronic stress hormone cortisol can drop significantly in a matter of minutes. By calming the amygdala, you stop treating every awkward silence or overflowing inbox as a mortal threat. You lower the volume of the old voice, and you actually start reconnecting with deeper fulfillment.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, Freedom and Your Calling. What happens when you finally exit the highway for good?
As we wrap up this explainer, let's look at where this newly forged path ultimately leads. By breaking the chains of constant rushing, you start experiencing deep inner freedom. And this freedom creates the exact mental clarity you need to discover your true calling. Think back to that clammy hand of stress we talked about earlier. When that hand finally releases its grip, you're no longer living on autopilot, right? You're not just reacting in a panic to the loudest voice in the room. Suddenly you have this quiet, expansive space required to recognize your unique gifts and align them with a purpose that goes way, way beyond just answering emails and checking off to-do lists. This source material frames us in a really beautiful way. Think about that deep exhaustion and inner unrest you feel on the highway not as a sign of failure, but as a divine signal, what it calls the living signature of God. It's an invitation to step off and find your true, unique purpose. It's a sign that you are meant for a higher destination than mere productivity. It's a persistent call to reclaim your true identity and live out your calling in total freedom, rather than in perpetual fear.
Which brings us to this incredible quote. Where your focus is, there is your energy. Where your energy is, there is your life. This powerful maxim really just summarizes our entire journey today. Whatever you consciously choose to focus on will literally dictate the quality of your existence. If you focus on the old voice, well, you're going to feed that cycle of fear and impulsivity. But if you choose to focus on the new voice, you build those robust neural pathways of peace and purpose. You are the inner engineer of your own life, and your gaze is your ultimate choice.
So I want to leave you with this final thought. The next time the pressure peaks, the agenda overflows, and that old voice whispers for you to rush just a little bit faster, what choice will you make? Will you stay on autopilot today, or will you take the exit towards your calling? The power is entirely in your focus. I challenge you to schedule just 5 minutes of absolute non-doing today and see what happens.